Nicky Rowbotham is a business leader who's recently authored a book titled 7 Steps to Finding Flow, Flip the Script on Stress. Now, this offering contains practical solutions, wisdom and strategies that aim to guide its reader through some of the difficulties stress may have placed on them. And to take us through the book and some of her own personal experiences with stress, Nicky Rowbotham joins me now via Zoom. Nicky, a very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Morning Live.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Before we get to the crux of this book, let's perhaps start with you giving us a brief breakdown of your own experience with stress.
I think, stress is something that we all normalize in our lives. Personally, I did for a long time, and I really used stress as an excuse for how I was delivering, how I was showing up, and how I was having impact in my day-to-day life, specifically building businesses, enabling teams. I'd gotten stuck into that state of being always on. And basically what had happened is I'd started then just layering stress over stress over stress, moving from one deliverable to the next, without really resting, recovering, and really bringing resilience and managing my energy in my life. And the problem that then happened is it started to take a toll on my health. And I had some quite severe symptoms in terms of back tension. I actually had a partial dislocation of my back, which I actually didn't even feel because my nervous system was so locked into a state of freeze, which is really a hyper state of fight or flight. I was diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome, massive sort of digestive issues from that perspective. And really it was reaching a point where I had to make a call that this really wasn't serving me anymore. It wasn't serving my delivery, because I was trading off the quality of my life and my lifestyle and my relationships at the same time. And I don't think I was being as effective as I thought I was at work.
And you say that it's time that we flip the script on stress. Tell us what you mean by that.
I think every one of us has to ask ourselves what the story is that we're telling ourselves about our stress. As I mentioned, I used it to justify so much of what I was doing, but I wasn't conscious at the time around the trade-off that I was making. And I'm asking everyone to really look at stress in their lives, specifically within their work and its far-reaching effects, and really ask yourself, is that payoff still worth it for you? And really, what is the point when the cost of stress in your life is too much? We have to use it as a wake-up call to be able to look at how we can come back and deliver more, because I'm actually delivering more now that I've healed, in a more easeful, resilient and aligned way from that perspective, rather than staying shackled in the stressed out, invisible straitjacket of stress, as I call it, which isn't easeful, it isn't resilient. And we end up showing up and spilling over onto our teams and the people around us with an energy that feels like a tightly closed fist rather than a gently unfurling palm. And I think for me, everything feels so much easier. I can anticipate stress coming and I can do far more, better creative things now that I've got perspective and I'm not locked into that overwhelmed state that's stressed out.
And how would you define flow and how it correlates with stress?
Flow, for me, many people are familiar with a Polish author's take on a flow state, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and he refers to it as a transient state that we enter in order to get something done, to create. But I believe it should be a state of being rather than a state of doing. I think it's an energy and a resilience that we can have in our lives that really supports us to do our best work. And I think it's got its foundations through my experience and my healing in both the state of our nervous system, releasing our nervous systems to be able to flow back into that state of rest and digest, not caught up in fight or flight, and then supported by our energy to create that resilience in our lives.
Okay. Now, do unpack for us, if you can, some of these 7 steps to finding flow as you detail them in this book.
Absolutely. The first step for me was release. And that was releasing my nervous system out of that locked-in state of freeze. When we've normalized a state of stress in our lives, we put everything else on hold other than our immediate survival. That shuts down things like digestion and reproduction, etc., or it can have those effects. So really working with your nervous system, improving your vagal tone, which is the tone of your vagus nerve. And there's lots of small tips and tricks around how to do that. Enables you to be far more easeful. The second step is really tuning in to make sure that we're really listening to the signals that our bodies are giving us as warning signs around issues with our health, and keep iterating to stay there, connecting back in, trusting our intuition, getting grounded out in nature. And I recommend going barefoot, no longer insulating yourself, and really using the healing powers of carbon in the ground, rest and regeneration, all about sleep, lightening the load, which is all about how we create an environment that really supports our bodies, and really a pause for potency as well. And then I obviously recommend coming up with a plan to support yourself with all of these components in your life, because hope isn't an action plan, and hoping it'll change isn't always the case.
And what are some of the lifestyle choices that one can make in order to start flipping the script on being stressed?
First of all, I think the biggest thing is we've got to own our stress. We've got to acknowledge our relationship with stress. It's not our reaction. It's not stress that kills us. It's our reaction and our relationship with stress that kills us. So we really have to call out the role that stress is playing in our life. But from a lifestyle perspective, the next steps for me were really around creating boundaries and really sort of clear definition of my life around what was acceptable and what was not. Designing your day in a way that you've got some degree of balance that serves you from that perspective, a full stop at the end of your day, prioritizing 7 to 8 hours sleep. Unfortunately, no one's an exception to that rule. Lightening the load was really around detoxing my life and my lifestyle, so moving to more natural products in my life, because our bodies absorb everything in, on, and around us from that perspective. And really then making sure we prioritize those pauses for potency that really give our bodies a step change to come back differently. There's obviously a lot more detail in the book, but those were some of the foundational elements, along with exercise, that really, really helped me recover.
And I suppose that is the big issue. How, in as much as stress seems inevitable, but then how do we avoid, excessive stress, and how do we deal with it?
Well, I think one of the most pivotal first steps I took in terms of changing the state of my nervous system was the first step that I took to really create that perspective around my stress. Previously, when I was locked into that state of freeze, that hyper fight or flight state, stress was happening up close and personal. Everything was triggering me. Everything was, really, really sort of affecting me and my health. I could feel it landing hard on my body. But as soon as I was able to normalize the state of my nervous system through a modality called TRE, which is trauma and tension release exercises. There's many exercises that can help with this. Our vagus nerve really is that kill switch that gets our nervous system back into that state of flow. All of a sudden, stress had moved away from me and things were happening. Gave me a few more milliseconds to see what was coming, make a conscious decision as to whether or not it needed to land on me, or I could just let it go past. It was really the most pivotal lifestyle change for me that gave me perspective over my stress and how others people's stress was landing on me.
Okay, we're out of time, unfortunately, Nicky, but just take us through the research that went into putting this book together, and perhaps some of the surprising discoveries about stress and flow that you stumbled upon.
Absolutely. Well, I read a hell of a lot in going into this. There were over 87 books. I reference a number of them in the book from that perspective. Read a number of white papers on that from that side of things, all in my journey to heal. This was personal research that I did before I even looked to write the book. But the biggest surprise for me was really around the incredible wisdom that our autonomic nervous system holds for us to be able to move into the state of flow. It really is the biggest healer we have in our body, if only we can get out of the way. I really experienced all of this research firsthand as an expert of my lived experience, as it were, and I really used all of that research to support the book, my healing, and hopefully serve others to find ways to really incorporate it into their lives as well.
And considering the difficult year that the year 2020 was for so many people, what kind of advice do you have for those that are trying to refine and rebuild their flow?
I think the biggest thing is to decide right now where their priorities are sitting. I regard balance as a flow. It's never completely balanced in all areas of our lives. We have to make a conscious decision as to where our priorities are at any one point in time. And it could be the fact that you're intentionally focused on work or your family or building a business, or in my case, at the end of last year, writing a book. And we get intentional about calling out what I'm going to call that slightly different balance in our lives. It almost feels imbalanced to some people. And if you get it right or wrong on one day, you can choose again differently the next day to get it right. We need to get rid of the perception of perfection. We need to remind ourselves that balance is our own personal balance. Tuli Madonsela, when she was the public protector, when asked how she juggles all of the balls that are in the air at any one time, said that she doesn't juggle them all. She consciously put some of them down so that she doesn't drop them, but she makes a conscious decision around where her focus is. That takes a huge amount of stress off every one of us if we make that conscious decision around where our focus is. Not that we're ignoring other areas of our lives. We might choose to pick that ball up tomorrow and focus there, but rather than thinking we have to be perfect and enough for everyone in every sphere of our lives, let's make a conscious decision around where our intention and our focus is to really help support us to find a less stressed out and overwhelmed day.
Nicky, there you go. Well said. Very well said. And thank you so much for advising us on how to flip the script on stress and how to decisively deal with it. We appreciate your time. And joining us on Zoom to speak about her book titled 7 Steps to Finding Flow, Flip the Script on Stress, that was Nicky Rowbotham.